imagine a future, and our imaginings horrify us.
In the case of this film, I wrote the script in the first person. It's the only time I've done that. It made it clear to anyone who read the script that we're on this ride with Oppenheimer.
It was very unusual. It took me a minute to actually comprehend. And then I realized, oh, that's a huge responsibility.
I don't know if we can be trusted, but I know the Nazis can't.
Cillian playing Oppenheimer was the centerpiece of the film, but I knew that he was going to need the most extraordinary ensemble around him.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
If Chris Nolan calls you and says that he'd like to meet with you, you're like, I don't care what it is.
You'd be mad to say no. I feel like that's probably everybody's answer with this.
From the second I read the script, I knew that he had a very acute vision, and if he were able to render that vision, that this film would be a masterpiece.
All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. Keep everyone there until it's done.
It feels to me like every single character is significant because they're all historical figures of consequence.
There's a chance when we push that button, we destroy the world.
Chances are near zero.
I tried to familiarize myself with Groves and the history, and then talk to Chris about what he needed from that part. Groves was almost like a kindergarten teacher in some respects because these scientists were so eccentric and not necessarily trustworthy. I mean, if you're looking from a military perspective.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
I was aware of who Louis Strauss was. I came to have a pretty even-handed understanding of him.
He was a righteous guy. I think he was a great public servant, but he's always behind the scenes. I've always appreciated the people who are backstage.
Truman needs to know what's next.
What's next?
With Kitty Oppenheimer, what I really was drawn to is she refused to conform to the sort of feminine ideal of the time. She had this defiance against the system that felt so modern.
Jean Tatlock was blunt, knew what she wants, but at no point is she ever punished for that, and especially not by Oppenheimer.
Theory will take you only so far.
Oppenheimer sees things in sort of different dimensions. Physicists operate on a completely different level than we do, and I think sometimes it's a burden. So I was really interested in that.
What we were looking for was a remarkably centered performance, the heart of the film, but also an ensemble piece. I was there on set every day, surrounded by a team of actors who knew more than I did about what was going on from their point of view. And that's what you're really looking for as a director.
It's a profoundly moving and overwhelming experience watching it, because you feel so compelled to watch what's happening with these people and how they're drawn into the biggest of moral dilemmas and what they're wrestling with, all of the characters.
With the sound design and the score and the emotionality of it, this is not a film, this is an experience.
When I saw it in its finished form, I was kind of like, wow, yeah, that's what we were hoping this could be.
The world will remember this day.
The Trinity test and the revelation of the first atomic explosion to the world was one of the most important moments in the 20th century.
The Trinity test and the development and the race and the fact that it was all attempting to save kind of humanity from fascism.
World War II would be over. Our boys would come home.
This is a matter of life and death. But I can perform this miracle.
What was really interesting was going back and trying to understand what these guys were thinking and the terrible decisions that were placed in front of them.
I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon, but I know the Nazis can't.
We live in the world that we live in because of what happened at Los Alamos.
This is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world.
All through humanity, we've been blinded by ambition and pursuit, and then the ramifications are something else.
That's happening, isn't it? I think that's why it's so bizarre and amazing that Chris is making this movie now. We're seeing parallels.
It's a profoundly overwhelming experience watching it.
Oppenheimer's story is just one of the greatest stories that there is.
The president needs to know what's next.
What's next?
When they were doing the Trinity test, they were asked, what are the chances of this going wrong and it blowing up the entire world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
Zero would be nice.
Detonator charge.
What is that decision to just still go ahead and do it.
It's an extraordinary moment in human history, and I wanted to take the audience into that room and be there when that button is pushed and really fully bring the audience to this moment in time.
3, 2, 1.
This is a national emergency. Our work here will ensure a peace mankind has never seen. The world will remember this day.
This is arguably the most important story of our time.
The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
It's profound, but it's told in a very human way.
Everything Chris Nolan has done has been a prelude to this.
This is not a film, this is an experience. It is a heart-in-your-mouth thriller.
I've been interested in Oppenheimer's story for a long time. At some point, I learned this key piece of information that in the lead up to the Trinity test, they were dealing with the very small possibility that when they pushed that button, they would set fire to the atmosphere of the Earth and destroy the entire planet. And yet, they pushed that button. I wanted to take the audience into that extraordinary moment in human history.
3, 2, 1, 0.
All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory.
Cillian playing Oppenheimer was the centerpiece of the film, but I knew that he was going to need the most extraordinary ensemble around him.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
The people involved in the Manhattan Project were charismatic individuals. They're very talented.
The world that Oppenheimer inhabits is filled with rock star scientists. And I think because we have all these fantastic actors, you really buy that.
It felt like I was playing sports with some of the best athletes. Every single person has come to set knowing that they have been hired because somewhere along the line, Chris thought that you did a good job. And this goes for crew as well.
Action!
My preference is to always do things in camera as much as possible. It sets a big challenge for every department to actually bring the reality of a thing there for the actors.
Every crew member on this film has to adjust their work for the IMAX screen.
IMAX can contain 18K resolution per frame, which is by far more than any digital camera. It gets thrown up on a gigantic screen, and the moment you watch it, it's very evident. The quality is unprecedented.
This is a story of America in the 20th century, so I think it can be painted on that big of a canvas, and what better way to do that but with IMAX cameras.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
I always try to use real locations as much as possible. With location shooting or sets, the more things can just be real, the better they're going to feel to the audience.
There's almost no studio work on this film. Everything is location.
The sets were built in such a way that they felt incredibly authentic.
We built our Los Alamos at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, which is along the same mountain range that Los Alamos proper sits on. This was very important, and I based all of this on research. We built all of these buildings 360. We want it to feel like you are right there, you are in this is happening, this is real. This isn't a backlot.
It's just the most transporting thing, you know, when you're there and it just looks exactly like Los Alamos 1940s must have looked, and you know that no detail has been overlooked.
You know, we also shot in a huge amount of the real locations. We shot in Oppenheimer's house, in Los Alamos. We shot in Princeton.
Walking through Princeton, it's really very funny because people, you know, they're walking around, they go.
Shooting those scenes, playing the characters who really had versions of these events happen there, you just get a real charge out of it, you know?
This is a matter of life and death. But I can perform this miracle.
When you do Chris's movies, things that when you read a script you normally would think would be visual effects, you know that you're going to be doing this stuff practically.
They had to film the world of quantum physics. Their whole unit was one big science project. I was daily very jealous.
It's kind of back to the old days.
We did a lot of experimentation. We came up with some very interesting analog methods of how to approach this, all of which was leading to the Trinity test, which had to feel nightmarish and terrifying in a way that computer graphics never really is. What we were able to get into the finished film, to me, is extraordinarily beautiful, but also very frightening.
Working with this whole team was such a great camaraderie, and with the commonality of we are going to get this in camera. I love Chris's dedication to that.
It really speaks to Chris and the way he directs.
All of the energy goes around the camera. Like, we're all here to do the same thing.
Chris makes films for theaters, for movie-going audiences. You know, so you want to see that as it's designed to be seen.
Watching this very different sort of film on that big screen, it sort of makes you gasp. You're right in their experience.
This is, I think, a definitive moment in the history of modern filmmaking. Do yourself a favor and go see this on as big a screen as you can.
With the sound design and the score and the emotionality of it, this is an unforgettable, unmissable experience in a theater.
You are the man who gave them the power to destroy themselves.
We made Oppenheimer on the largest scale possible because the idea is to come and experience this. His story is monumental and epic and extraordinary. It really has to be seen on the big screen to be believed.
They won't feel it until they understand it. And they won't understand it until they've used it.
Oppenheimer's story is one of the biggest stories imaginable. Our film tries to take you into his experience, and IMAX for me is a portal into a level of immersion that you can't get from other formats.
IMAX is a format of spectacle, and it's made for vistas and for the grandeur of it. But I got very curious to discover this as an intimate format. The face is like a landscape. There's a huge complexity and a huge depth to it. How can we get this camera closer to people? How can we get this medium to work also as a very intimate medium?
Chris is always pushing the boundaries and innovating with each film he does. On this one of the things that was really important in the script was the juxtaposition of color and black and white.
I don't think Chris would be capable of doing something kind of the way everyone else does it.
He kind of invented this idea of shooting in IMAX for feature film, and so you're kind of on the cutting edge of this stuff every time you work with him.
How are we going to do it? Because 65mm black and white was a format that didn't exist. So there was a lot of engineering that went into that.
We actually had to create the black and white film that we were using to shoot.
We were able to test large format black and white, put it up on a giant IMAX screen and have a look at it, and the results were just magical and inspiring.
I was sitting in the back of a 47 Packard with an IMAX mag on my lap, trying to get this driving shot, and I just felt like I went back to some origins of great cinema school. Because, you know, these lenses are coming at you and they're this close, and it wakes you up.
We've shot with IMAX many times on other movies, but watching this very different sort of film on that big screen, it sort of makes you gasp. You're right in their experience.
I think it feels quite human. It feels like you are in that moment with them.
You know, it's a mythic, massive story. This is an unforgettable, unmissable experience in a theater.
Chris makes films for theaters, for movie-going audiences. And the best, the most immersive version of that is IMAX.
It gets thrown up on a gigantic screen, and the moment you watch it, it's very evident. The quality is unprecedented.
15 of IMAX 70mm is the highest quality imaging format that's ever been devised. It allows you to fully immerse yourself in the story. Where the audience is able to see this on IMAX on the big screen, they'll be able to experience an extraordinary moment in human history.
As soon as I read the script, I'm putting the pieces together in my mind. For Oppenheimer, we had a meeting and we started talking about different approaches and different types of musical ideas.
The film score grew very organically and very gradually from the smallest elements. And I had no preconceptions about the music for the film. Sometimes you have an idea for the soundscape of the world or the rhythm of it, and sometimes you don't. And in this case, all I had that I gave Ludwig was the idea of basing the score on the violin.
There's so much in the performance of the violin. Within seconds, you can go from something beautiful to something completely horrifying.
And there's a tension to the sound in a way that I think fits the highly strung intellect and emotion of Robert Oppenheimer very well.
And that's just the organic part of it. That's just the strings. And then what comes on later is the production and the synthesizers.
I think every process of scoring is different if it's to be tailored correctly to the demands of a new project. And this was a type of film I hadn't made before, and it was a type of music that I hadn't worked with before.
A lot of things you do in the beginning is about experimenting and see where you can take things.
We would take his experiments and we would put them to picture and edit them and try different things and show it to Ludwig, and he would go and bring more things to the table.
Oppenheimer is a visual masterpiece. You know, I've never seen that kind of intimate portrayal of a character on IMAX. That's the 6-note Oppenheimer theme. I felt like this movie was really pushing the boundaries in so many different fields. So I wanted to see how we can do that with music as well.
I think Ludwig's work on the film is both deeply personal and historically expansive. I think it really achieves an enormous amount of the effect of drawing the audience into the emotional dilemmas of the characters. I think he's really put together a very remarkable score.
Hope you enjoyed your behind-the-scenes look. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you here next time. Later.